we're going to pick you up with some data, right? Exciting after lunch. That 4-letter word. What we hope to do is clearly talk about the value of data and its importance and why we need to collect it to drive those outcomes that create the income. But I think in addition to that, Shannon, you've been pretty darn popular from an operator's perspective, with the operators in the audience wanting to figure out, how do I practically apply all of this stuff that we're talking about? And I think we're going to dive into a little bit of that as we go through this journey here over the next 30 minutes or so. So starting there, as an operator, Shannon, tell me a little bit about what value-based care looks like for a resident within a senior living community as a foundational starting point.
Sure. I love that question. I wish I could take credit for that question. But what I love about it is it's putting the resident in the center. You're asking about what does that look like from their perspective. And in order to do that, we really need to look at it through the lens of the resident. So when I think about if I'm a resident moving into a value-based care community, I'm a queen. I feel like a queen. How can you not, with this collaborative team of experts who are rallying all around me, working towards my health and wellness goals, as well as the things that I already need help with. And then, not only that, but I have such a sense of security. I have security because a value-based care organization is not afraid to share those data and those outcomes that we talked about. So, opposed to another community where I'm hearing the same promises during that sales process of how I'm going to take care of you and these are all the things that we're going to do for you, I know that I'm moving into a community that is holding themselves accountable. They're holding themselves accountable because they are measuring the things that are important to me. They know where they stand with them, and they're not afraid to be transparent and show that. And so it gives me that confidence to know that they're putting their money where their mouth is. And in addition to that, it just creates a culture within that value-based community where I, as a resident, can feel that culture and that camaraderie and that spirit that is all revolved around me and my needs and my goals.
So as a follow-up, and you do get credit for this question, in our prep session you brought this up, and I think extraordinarily valuable. Yeah. What does value-based care look like for your employees and your caregivers?
Sure. Well, we saw on one of Alan's first slides, and I think it was something organic that just grew that we weren't really anticipating or expecting. But when we think of a value-based care community, we really need to think about all the stakeholders. And one of those really important stakeholders are your employees. We measure our employees' happiness, satisfaction with their role at Bickford on a monthly basis. And we saw in Virginia, as the slide demonstrated, that their happiness and satisfaction increased over 100% once we adopted our higher path senior care model. And I attribute a lot of that to the fact that we are bringing everyone that works there into this so that they can see and understand their part that they play in it. So it's not just a higher level senior management thing. It's not even just a care team thing. It is the entire branch and everyone that's there. A great example of that would be a maintenance coordinator. How can I, as a maintenance coordinator, feel like I am making this impact on a resident's life? And it very well could have become, we had a resident that was having significant falls, maybe multiple falls a week. And through some of the technology and the tools that we have available to us now, we were able to identify that one of the reasons that she was falling was that she needed to have her furniture rearranged in her apartment. So it was to the maintenance coordinator, hey, Sally's falling. I need you to like rearrange her bed needs to go over here. He's on it right away. And how does that make him feel when we're able to go back in a month and say, you know what, thank you so much. Since you did that and rearranged all of her furniture, do you know she hasn't had a fall in 30 days? And it takes something from a task-oriented that so many of our employees in their roles into connecting them to something that's meaningful and impactful to them. And so that was really surprising when we saw those results and their happiness. We felt it because you can always feel the heartbeat of your communities when you walk in. So we knew it was there, but we hadn't measured it yet. And when we saw that, that was really, really powerful. And so, as operators, I know this isn't a conference on staffing. They have whole other days devoted to that, but it's still a point for everyone. And if you have a staffing problem, this is a solution for you because it aids in that retention and it keeps people connected to their purpose and their why they're there.
Beautifully said. So Joelle, maybe a 3 or 4 part question, so I'll try to go one at a time to keep us on track. What information does the clinician need to effectively institute value-based care?
Sure, and we have a lot of clinicians in the room, so definitely seek them out and get their input. But I think ultimately what we're trying to understand is who's changing. Why are they changing, and who should actually care about that change, right? And so that's not just from a clinical perspective, our pills, procedures, and diagnostics, that those are clinical tools that are available to us to understand on a cellular level and on a biological level what's happening with you, but even just to the extent of some of the observational information that's available in communities. And we've heard from a variety of different solution providers in this industry around information or data that you can extract that actually helps you to understand like something's changing with this resident. Even if it's a behavior, perhaps you have someone who used to engage in the community regularly and then all of a sudden they're starting to disengage. This is information that is indicative of something going on, right? It could be that, they don't find that activity enjoyable anymore. It could be that they're in the midst of a mental health crisis. It could be that they're experiencing a health decline that we haven't been able to detect yet. And so I think oftentimes what we're looking for is just understanding who's changing, what's changing, why it's changing, and who should ultimately care about it, and what action we can take on that.
So aside from the clinicians, does any of that roll up, or is it different information for the senior living community staff and or the leadership of the community?
So Dr. Nash had 4 words that he used. I always say there's like a 5-word phrase that I like to use, which is what you measure gets managed. And so I think a lot of times if we're not actually paying attention to why are we measuring this? What is the real question that this information is trying to answer for me? Or what is this trying to demystify or provide clarity for me? And I think part of why we're seeing some success, which Shannon's talking about and we've heard others talk about in these communities that have real tight and meaningful relationships with healthcare providers, is that we are all looking at the same information. So at the end of the day, we're all serving the same person. And in fact, we all want the same outcome. We want them to live out the final chapters of their life at their home in this community, right? No one moves into an assisted living community saying, I really look forward to dying in the hospital. And so I think to the extent that, yes, there's always going to be more clinical measures that, that someone who's actually providing hands-on clinical care need to look at, oftentimes it's the less clinical insights that are more focused on the actual individual and the experience that they're having, which typically is something that a community is more attuned to, that is giving us insight about that individual. And so the more that we can all look at the same data about the same people as we work for the same outcomes, I think the more likely we're going to be able to move along together collectively. Any
must-have key performance indicators?
Well, and if you look in your workbook, sorry, I didn't bring mine up.
It's an open book test, page 34.
Yeah, so in the back, there's a list of some higher path metrics. But again, I think what's been so fascinating for me as I've started to spend hundreds of hours in communities now is understanding that actually a lot of the same things that I cared about when I was at risk at a health plan, or if I was building out population health tools for providers, is that they're the same measures that senior living cares about because they impact your business and operations in the same way. So if a resident falls, that creates complete chaos in your community. If a resident is sent out to the emergency room, the likelihood that they come back is is diminished. And so these are some of the same metrics that we care about. But again, I think where we can double click and go into another layer of information is understanding those observational things that like a physician's never going to have eyes, ears, and hands on a resident the way that senior living does. And so how do we start to surface up, some of these things around people who are becoming less engaged in the community? The Surgeon General declared that we have an epidemic of loneliness. We were just talking about that with Project Love Meter, and how do we get people more engaged with residents in the community? So even this type of information, thinking about the resident from a holistic perspective, not their clinical side, and then also their engagement side in the community, but really comprehensively.
Thank you. So Diane, with all of this, everything we're talking about today, right? Barriers in getting started is, towing the line and starting the race is the biggest challenge. So can you talk to us a little bit about some of the primary barriers in collecting and organizing data as we run into value-based care?
Yeah, so I want to pick up on something that Joelle said. So Joelle is saying that what a plan cares about, and then, largely what CMS cares about, is the same thing that a senior housing community cares about. And I think that is absolutely true. I think, though, that there are a lot of senior housing communities where adverse events are happening and they don't necessarily, they can't crosswalk that up to or translate it in a way that resonates with the plan or with CMS. And so I think the first question I'd want to ask, and maybe not to you all folks, because I think you're in the top 25%, or you're working with communities that are in the top 25% of performance, but do you even know what a plan and a plan and CMS and providers too, what do they care about? How would you package the data and organize it in a way that resonates with them? So that's question number one. I think a barrier is just that fundamental understanding of what that audience is looking for. So then bringing that further down in terms of actually collecting it, organizing it, and sharing it, I think today I heard 40 plus point solutions. Yesterday I heard up to 60. And in my brain, I'm there's a part of me that's oh my God, that's an amazing amount of data, treasure trove. I just said that about an hour ago. On the other hand, I'm how in the world do you make sense of all of that? That's an ocean, a very large ocean of data. And as a data person, I think, how do you connect all of that? How do you create a longitudinal file for each person so that you can then look at the evolution of their care and start to place those adverse events, and then try to think about what caused that adverse event, or what could have mitigated the risk of that adverse event? And so when I think about collecting and organizing, how do you even pull that together? I think there's probably a lot of data in those 60 point solutions that's probably not all relevant. So first is just sifting through and identifying what is relevant, and then how do you pull that together in one longitudinal file at the resident level?
Thank you. So now to the practical application, Shannon, right? As an operator, we heard at the start of the day, right? You guys have taken steps that have already had a positive impact on bottom line, patient outcomes, resident outcomes. So for the group of operators here, tell us the steps an organization must take to develop an actionable plan, and maybe demystify for those that don't know about it, what is this higher path and the meetings associated with it that you guys have instituted?
Sure. So at Bickford, like many providers, we had a weekly meeting, right? A weekly meeting where we would do these status updates, and we would, this happened, and this happened. And we realized through actually a different path of another program that we were running on the business operational side that, wow, really needs to be more about getting traction, actionable items for these residents. Like, we have all this data now, but what do we do with it? Because to just warehouse it and look at it and analyze it is great, but how does that translate to what we're doing for the resident? So I think it just really started with this grassroots effort of, you have to get your senior leadership team all on board and be willing to be open, honest, and transparent, have those type of conversations where you challenge each other and just come together as, the collaboration started there for us first. And then we became in sync and then realized too that, well, this is bigger than just us at Bickford Senior Living. We also need to collaborate with others in the industry and help partner and vet people who were like-minded. And that is just how it started to grow. And each person's contribution just created energy. And it was really that force then that we just brought that back to our leadership teams at our divisional level and at our communities. And it was infectious and it caught on. And once we started seeing those transition to results in our residents and getting that affirmation from them, I don't want to say that it was easy, but it was easy. It was easier than we anticipated it to be because we had buy-in from everyone.
Can I add one thing
Please.
to this? So part of what I also think, the first question you asked was, what do clinicians need? What do communities need? So frequently, you're shouting into the void, right? You're writing an order, you're just hoping that there's a follow through there. I think what Shannon's hitting on is that you all have been able to leverage this collaboration to have that closed loop. So I always say we can measure actions and then we measure results, right? So did we do the thing that we said we were going to do? And did it get us the result that we thought it was going to get us? And so to the extent that communities can also start to close that loop for providers, that yes, we're actually taking the action, these things are happening with this resident, and then the ability to close that loop out. Because so often, even as a provider, you go in and you take the action, and then we're waiting to see. Or when I used to work at a health plan, again, it's like shouting into the void, "Hey, can you please go do this? We think it might be really helpful." And then I wait for 180 days to see if the claim comes through, right? And so this idea of like how can the community also be that closed loop for follow up?
So deliberately sitting in these meetings, for the group, there's a commitment from you, from your partners, starting with time.
Right.
How long is this meeting?
So we have in each of our communities, there is a weekly 90-minute meeting. And that is the biggest obstacle when I'm talking to other operators, is that I don't have time. We heard people addressing that today. Our nurses are so busy, we can't add another thing to their plate. And so it really is just understanding that if you were to take a step back and look at a nurse's day and really think about and have her analyze all of the different impromptu interjections that come from this person calling or this person coming with a concern, or all these different things that are distractions that you start and stop, this actually gives a really focused time, and that really actually gives people time back. It's very structured, so it presents a sense of calm for everyone that's working at the local level, and it really has become a time too of celebrating. I know Alan said, hey, be off of your phones, but for us, all of our aggregate data comes to us on Friday, because it tells us, hey, did our residents win this week? And so we're all looking at it. We're all talking about it. We're excited for it. to come together on that meeting on Friday. It's no longer just check the box, this is something I have to go to. It's become something that we've all looked forward, and we want to be there because we're all there for the same reason, and we're seeing the wins. Winning feels good. It feels good as you as an operator when you win. It feels good for your residents and your families. And so it just creates this winning culture. And then how can you argue with that?
Can you share a little bit about who's in that meeting?
Sure.
Internally and externally.
Yes. So internally, it would be our regional divisional director of health and wellness, as well as the health and wellness director at the community site level, the executive director, our sales role, we call it a family advocate. Our life enrichment is a part of that meeting. Our kitchen manager is a part of that meeting because, nutrition is a big part of getting a resident on the higher path, as well as our Fox therapy partners, our nurse practitioner with our primary cares that we've partnered with. And then we have people that aren't always there consistently, but we have other providers, hospice, home care representatives and things. And so it's a 90 minutes every week.
And I think Joelle brought up a great point. This is the path you were going down, which is we talk about everybody, there are goals, there are action items, and then there are deliverables that everybody is expected to bring back the following week so that we jointly hold each other accountable and know exactly what each are collectively working on, which is what produces the outcomes. And so they don't fall into a void of somebody was supposed to do that, but they didn't, and thus the resident didn't get the care that was needed. So, again, you got all the multi-part questions, Joelle. So we'll start. I'm going to work backwards here, throw a slight curveball. So as we go into value-based care, what information do we as operators and care providers and clinicians need from the resident to get this thing started?
Oh, I love this topic because one of the big gripes that I have is we talk about value-based care, but has anyone ever asked a consumer what they value in their health care? And if you ask them about health outcomes, would they really have an answer for that? Like, guys, I couldn't tell you what my blood pressure is, right? When you sit down and talk to a senior about their goals or their objectives, it's not like, oh, I really want to get my A1C reading down and, I'm really looking for this. Like, I want to be able to walk around the block. I want to be able to sit at dinner for 90 minutes with my family once a week when they come on Sundays. It's my granddaughter is graduating in three weeks, and I want to be able to go to the ceremony and then not have to immediately come back home, right? So how do we start having more meaningful conversations with our residents about the things that actually are of value, that would be a win for them as an individual? Because look, we have a resident at our transformation center, and his big goal is that he likes to go on the grocery shopping trip once a week because he never wants his daughter to have to buy groceries for him. He also happens to be a diabetic that likes to skip lunch, which of course the trip is right after lunch. And so look, Carl wants to go grocery shopping. In order for Carl to go grocery shopping, we have to have his diabetes under control, otherwise he gets lightheaded and we have to bring him back. And so while that may not necessarily be a clinical measure, I'm not going in there and reading his glucose every time he goes to Walmart, but I can remind him, hey, we got to go down, we have to eat lunch, then we're going to go grocery shopping. Now all of a sudden we have an outcome that matters to him. He feels independent. He can brag to his daughter that he bought his own stuff, right? And we're able to actually do something that we know is going to help him from a clinical perspective too. So I think it's so easy to get hyper-focused on what's on the scoreboard, right? Yes, those healthcare outcomes matter, and we need to be keeping track of those. But I think for this population in particular, if we had a conversation with them about what is a good day, what is a meaningful, purposeful day for you, or what's a goal that you have, And I also love this because it completely changes the conversation about what senior living can do for consumers, right? So right now people are moving in and it's like an inevitability, like, oh, I'm going into the community and then I'm just going to decline into, you know, it's time for me to die. And I think we all know that actually when you move into these communities, you are going to be surrounded by care and support and probably greater access to health care. And so we should be able to at least stabilize, if not even improve, this experience for them. And so how do we start to actually have that conversation where suddenly this isn't just a slow decline or frankly a fast decline into inevitability, but you're getting to participate and engage in having a purposeful and meaningful day for you. So that is what I think the resident can provide.
No, and then to that end, like what's our obligation as clinicians and operators and care providers to educate the resident about value-based care and the fact that they are a part of that?
Yeah, and I think that there's the combination of, I always talk about what's desirable and feasible, right? So like, by the way, I would love to be able to swim a lot faster than I can in the 100-meter, right? Like, that is desirable to me. I would need to spend a lot more time in the pool, which is not feasible right now. And so how do we have the conversation with the residents around like what's both desirable for them and feasible for them? Because I have a strong conviction that we all have the ability to both live and die well. And it all starts with being able to have a conversation about what is a good, meaningful, purpose-driven day for you.
So, Shannon, to that end, you guys have instituted this, you've leaned into it. I'm curious, in the education process, do you use this as a sales and marketing tool, the fact that you guys are leaning into value-based care to drive those occupancy levels that we saw earlier today?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we are no longer just in the sales process reacting to what has already happened and how can we solve that for you. We are now asking, you know, what are your health and wellness goals? You know, I heard earlier concern about, well, is this really appropriate for an independent living because it sounds like maybe this is too, you know, skilled care focus. But we're trying to flip that narrative to be upstream. And so it's absolutely appropriate for independent living because what are your health and wellness goals that you have so that we can help you live happier, healthier, longer. And that is kind of a different approach during that sales process. People are like, oh, I never really thought about that. I thought I had to just come here because I fell at home and I had to get some therapy and they said I'm not ready to go back home yet. So I thought I had to come here for that. But now you're saying, oh, there's other things that you can help me with so that I stay healthy, and maybe there's something that I haven't even been able to do yet, but now you're going to help me see if I can make that a reality.
Absolutely. And bringing us home before Coach comes back up and blows the whistle here, Diane, what data, aside from those KPIs on page 34 that we talked about, good data and measurables there, but what data is necessary to create a patient-centered experience for older adults?
So I think that there is a world in which there's patient-centered data, there's the information that value-based care organizations want, and that can all live harmoniously. Like, I don't think it has to be one or the other. And so the way I would think about it is we start with, I mean, if your goal is to achieve a value-based care contract with a payer or with an ACO, you need to know like what's important to them. And so like I would like put that at like I just thought about like the Ted Lasso locker room, like the Believe, like I would literally just like put that up there so that I know like I've got my head in the game and I'm thinking it's got to be about improving care, improving outcomes, and reducing costs. Then from there, I think it's really important to think about, okay, what does the person want for themselves? So what is that personal goal they have? And then what's going to motivate them to achieve that goal? And then what are your day-to-day actions to motivate them to achieve the goal that then achieves the Believe goal? And there needs to be this through line so that you can optimize your data and make it resonate with that overarching goal. And so when I think about like what data is necessary, I would start with like what is as an organization that is seeking revenue, what do you want? What does your payer want? And what does your consumer want? And pull those things together and ensure that there's a through line from one to the other.
Can I pile on one quick thing
Please.
too? Because I also think communities, like you said, have all these systems with all these, it's really exciting data. But we also have healthcare partners. And as much as we need to hold AccuShield and and CarePredict and all these other technologies accountable for sharing information with us, we need to hold our healthcare providers accountable for sharing information with us too, because you all have access to a lot of information that would be very insightful for a senior living operator that they wouldn't necessarily have. And I also know that you have access to data that comes through, more regularly, where Shannon's probably got people banging the phones trying to figure out where her residents are, where you could easily get that from admits, discharges, and transfer data. So I would just encourage all of us to hold our healthcare partners accountable for sharing information as well.
What a way to wrap up. Hold us accountable. Absolutely. Thank you. That is our time, Coach. I think now some group activities to get the blood flowing a little bit, right?
Yeah, we've been, you've all kind of been receivers of information here for a while, right? So it's been, hour and a half. So now's our time to re-engage, get back in the table conversations, right? I think we're on page 23 here, right? I think, again, it's really, really important to have these conversations and talk amongst your table about answering these questions, because data is going to drive this. And I'm really, really curious to hear kind of what comes out of these conversations. So we heard some really cool stuff out there at the tables when we were listening in and talking about data. So we've got a microphone here, and we're just going to roam around, and Joelle's going to kind of lean in to what she heard and get feedback directly kind of from the sources out there on the floor. So we're going to do the integration a little bit differently, and they're going to kind of come around and do a little on-the-spot interview and talk with you guys about what they heard and some of the interesting stuff. So Joelle is coming your way now, and we'll have a little integration in that way.
Yeah, watch out. I'm roaming. I'm looking for victims.
Reporter on the street.
Oh, I'm coming to you live, everybody. Oh, I hear here at this table, Diane. Yeah.
I gave this team the longest heads up. So.
Oh, well, then it's only fair you talk.
And I gave another team 7 seconds, so you can be last. But do you want to talk a little bit about, as the operator, about the responses? Thank you.
So when we began talking about data collection and how the company that I work for pushed that down into our facilities, we are a company that owns SNFs, ALs, ILs, home care, hospice. So we're looking more at our facilities. We developed a scorecard. According to most of your higher path metrics are on our scorecard, mixed with some staffing and PBGA reporting, which in the SNF world makes a huge impact on our 5-star QM measures. So when a facility falls below, they have meetings with us at the higher level to help them push those metrics higher. The piece that we're missing in our company that I liked is that 90-minute Friday meeting, kind of like a miniature ops management meeting. How are our administrators and EDs pushing their team to better their scores? We can have strategic planning at the higher level, but if it's not happening at the facility level, they're not interpreting their data, they don't know what it means, and they don't know how to predict where they're going. And that's our hope for the scorecard, is that we're giving them the knowledge and the ability to do that.
If only there was software out there for you to use to support that meeting, maybe. Talk to me later. All right, what else we got?
All right. Oh, whoa, that was loud. Okay, here we go. Susan, I'm coming for you. I hear you all were having a conversation about technologies for predicting risk. Don't you back away. I've got my sights set on you too. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that conversation?
Well, what we were really talking about is, we're capital partners.
Yep.
So trying to understand how this really gets integrated, measured, accountability, really the mechanics of it. because we're not, we don't, we're too far removed, so we're not seeing that. So we were asking, or at least I was asking, way too many detailed questions on it, like how do we get this going and quickly?
Yeah. Did you get any good answers you want to share with the group?
Well, we definitely got good answers from Bickford, and also Jerry is here. He's our resident expert. So really trying to understand how it works, because we'll talk about it later, but the capital partners will be helping fund and support this technology development, and we want to understand it.
Did you guys hear that? Capital partners. Yeah, here we go. Can we get a high five and a round of applause for that? That's amazing. I heard there was a table talking about data standardization. I think it was this group.
That was our quarterback. So one of the things that we were talking about at this table is just the standardization of data. So in senior living, every operator is doing what's important to them. We all use proprietary assessment tools. What if we really consolidated all that together? What if, as an industry, we decided what's important to all of us and how do we measure it? What more could we do to really move the industry along?
Thank you. I love that. I also think that something that's really interesting here is how would having some consistency or standardization in the way we talk about services and quality and measuring outcomes in senior living change the shopping experience? So we wouldn't have to concede every move into a third party where, we're buying 5 stars, right? So that would be I think it could have a really interesting impact on kind of shopping, figuring out the right community for your loved one based off of their unique needs.
How do go? Yeah. Head over there to Brad, and I'm gonna put
Brad,
him on
raise
the
your
spot
hand
a
for
little
me
bit.
because I'm in a sea
So
of people.
I want to
Thank
know.
you.
We got okay, we're in the room, a bunch of operators, right? We got Nick at the table here. We got Senior Living 100s here. We got Argentum here. How do they think about standardization from a data standpoint? We've been talking about this for 30 plus years. Where would we be if we'd agreed upon 10 data points? Maybe Diane would have been out of a job, but other than that, we'd be all in good shape, right? If we'd have been 10, 15 data points we all agreed upon, and this is what we're going to do. Is that even in the realm of possibility, or how do we think about that? How does Argentum think about that?
We think we've had some conversations, and actually Joelle's been part of a group that's helped us through the past 18 months talking about these things. And we do think quality measures are important moving forward. We think VBC, we're very bullish on it. It is the future of the industry. We are working with NIC, with Nick, with the other association partners on these items as well. So there's conversations happening, but at the end of the day, yes. How do we collect this data? We need taxonomies, we need definitions we agree to, and then we have to think about a process, how we do collect the data. We're not a data collection organization, but we think we can sort of frame it out and help the industry move forward. So there's a lot baked in there. It's not an easy thing to do, but you have to start, and that's the key. We have to start, and we start it now, so that, to your point, 5, 10 years from now, it's sort of the regular, it's expected. And anyone entering the market sees that we've already established it and adopts it right from the beginning. So we do think there's going to be some new entrants and some new players in the market over the next 10, 15 years. So we want to be prepared for that as well. And then at the end of the day, you need data. It's going to give you credibility. It's going to show your value. And if you don't have data, you're going to have trouble affecting change at CMS, on Capitol Hill, and everywhere else you need to affect change. So I hope that answered it. I don't know.
Awesome. Thank you. Wrong sport analogy, but I always like to say building data products is like the field of dreams. If you build the metric, the data will eventually come. And so we plant a flag. I'm going to go to this table right here. I'm going to hand this. Oh, come on. Jump in there. Get in there.
Andy was supposed to be our speaker. He's our quarterback.
I'm like, let me just find someone new.
So we talked a lot about just creating a plan of action, because I think everyone knows data is important, but I think there still are a lot of operators who are trying to figure out their game plan to go with the right vendor, figure out how those vendors can talk to each other, what KPIs are important, and then how can the data be disseminated to create action and create, better outcomes and better care for residents. So I think that was mainly what we were talking about. Yeah.
I'm
awesome.
curious, Diane, is there opportunities in all the work and research you're doing? Will there be opportunities that come out of that says, hey, here's like 15 data points that are important, or 20, or is there a chance we can get somewhere with that?
Yeah, I think there is. I was joking about not doing it, but I will say that some years ago, I had that thought, like, what are the I was actually thinking 5.
Yeah.
Like, what's the app with the 5 things? Like, something like medications, are you socializing today? And your caregiver could look at those, whether it's a caregiver like your family member or you're in a community and it's somebody that is working, a staff person. But what are those things, 5, 10, 15 items that are standardized across anyone and would alert you enough to do a follow-up? And so I do think that there is a world for that.
All right. Anything else you heard curiously, interestingly enough, that you want to chat about here from a data perspective as you were out in the room? Anybody else that's got, maybe we got a roaming mic now. If anybody else wants to speak into the room, raise your hand, and the roaming mic will find you. Mr. Mann, our GM.
Yeah, so one of the themes that I'm picking up on from the last few sessions was around data, and was having a conversation with Satish earlier. And I think the vendors have to do their part. And so our hope is that we can have a conference like this every year. But here's the caveat, and here's what I want to say and go on record saying, is that vendors need to have a separate conference to understand how we integrate with one another. Because we talk about it all the time, but until vendors start to become friends, and even with your potential competitor, things aren't going to change. And so I pick that up here as a vendor. I'm raising my hand. I'm really hoping that aside from this time next year, prior to that, vendors need to get together and attack this issue. So going on record, say that.
And it's on record because it was just videotaped. So we'll,
I was just going to say, I think a few.
Should we
of us
have
in
the vendors
room
come up here on
have
stage
homework.
and?
All right, Bob, I'm coming for you. Yes, sir.
I actually want to comment on something you said, Joelle, and on the other comments that have just made. To the extent you commented, Joelle, I think you said then maybe in the next 10 to 15 years we'll really have something. We don't have that long. What I would say is that we will either, as an industry, figure out for both the consumer and the payer and give them direction based on data as to what quality they should look for and expect, or someone else will do it for us. If someone else does it for us, we won't like the result. Look at what happened to the skilled nursing sector. So basically, you collect data, then you aggregate data. Collection at our table, we had 2 different operators and what they were doing, recognizing the private payer. There weren't any standards to look at. So what did you decide as to what you should measure and what was most important? And so they're doing it themselves. So I said, give your information and give your card to Diane, because we need to know what you're measuring and why. But again, there's no turning back from having been discovered as a setting where there are a lot of frail elders who spend a lot of healthcare dollars. So there's going to be a spotlight, and either we're going to, as an industry, come together through data to define to the consumer and the payer what quality looks like, or someone else will do it for us, and we won't like the result. So, and it's not 15 years away. It's basically by the end of this decade. We'll either figure it out in the next 5 years or someone else will do it for us.
Hear, hear.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other? Oh, we got one more back there, Dr. Patel.
I was waiting for a doctor to raise their hand. All right, Dr. Patel, tell us more.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of preface on Bob's point that the timing is definitely more of an urgent nature, and no matter what the data that we collect, the end point is it has to elicit a behavior change, right? We have to do something with the data. The data also has to be presented in a way that shows that change back to CMS, back to any other payers that we're dealing with. If we don't do that, then it's exactly what Bob just said, right? It's going to be regulation, and they're going to tell us how to behavior change. So it's on us as an industry to not only collect the data, but then also do something about it so that when we present it back to any agency or any kind of governing body or CMS or what have you, that they're seeing that change. They're seeing the dollars being saved because of the data and the behavior change that's occurring because of it. So I just wanted to kind of point out the end point to all the different points that were made.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Patel. Anybody else? We got like 1 minute. Anybody else? Oh, there's another.
Got one more.
We were talking about how vendors find partners, not vendors. So very similar to what's going on here. Everyone's partnering to find a solution. Vendors will just give you a technology, not support it. Partners are going to work with you, work with other partners in the industry to find a solution. We always say we have people that are customers and we have people that are partners. So the more that we can partner together with things, conferences like this, like Charles said, just a vendor conference as well, but also partnering with operators, hearing what data you need and not just saying, here's our system, go use it, is extremely helpful. So more of this, more of what do you need, how do you need it, as well as working with the vendors.
All right. The only request I have is when that vendor conference takes place, I want it to be videotaped because I want to see what you all say about us, right? I want to hear what you guys really have to say about the operators when you all get together and talk, all right? So great panel. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate kind of the change in the audible here. So awesome job, guys.